This is a big milestone for the PC Engine, and I've got a lot to say about Sangokushi Eiketsu Tenka ni Nozomu. But let me go to the elephant in the room first. Why is the box weird? Well, that's because the game came with a rather weirdly bound manual. Yes, that's a manual. You also got a big fold-out map of China with the game that had details on the provinces and units. With that out of the way, let's get into the real meat of this. Sangokushi Eiketsu Tenka no Nozomu is the first PC Engine game based on Romance of the Three Kingdoms. Though it's also very far from the last PC Engine game based on the novel. Sangokushi is the Japanese translation of the title of Romance of the Three Kingdoms. And if you wanted to get really literal with translating the Japanese into English, it would be something like Ambition for Three Kingdoms. Romance of Three Kingdoms is probably the second most influential piece of literature in Asia, right behind Journey to the West. The book was written sometime in the 14th century, and it was historical fiction. It was a story on a grand stage, recounting the period from the 2nd century when the Han Dynasty collapsed, leading to nearly a century of civil war in China. The through line of the novel are the three largest powers that emerged during this period, and the book covers their rise and fall, because, spoiler alert for history, none of the three win. Romance of the Three Kingdoms is a mammoth novel, filled with epic battles, larger-than-life heroes, dramatic betrayals, and the destiny of an entire nation hanging in the balance. So, naturally, it's been adapted more times than I can count. In fact, I don't think there's been a point since 1994 when there hasn't been a new adaptation of Romance of the Three Kingdoms airing on Chinese television. And in terms of video games, there's roughly 100 Romance of the Three Kingdoms games. And the most prominent of those are Koei's series of strategy games, which in Japan are just called Sangokushi, and in the US are known as Romance of the Three Kingdoms. But since the book is in the public domain, that made the title up for grabs for everyone else. Which is why Naxatsoft could call their game Sangokushi. They just had to add the Eiketsu Tenka ni Nozomu to avoid the trademark. Now, a funny thing about this game is that it is based on one of the adaptations of Romance of the Three Kingdoms. Specifically, the comic adaptation by Yokoyama Mitsuteru. That adaptation was Yokoyama's most successful work, though outside of Japan, he's best known as the creator of the giant robot genre. When you start playing Sangokushi Eiketsu Tenka ni Nozomu, you are first given your choice of what faction to play as. I'm going to be using the common English transliterations for these names. Otherwise, I'd be going from the Japanese transliteration of Chinese to English, and that just really makes things worse. So your options for playable characters are Liu Bei, the ruler of Shu, and essentially the heroic character of the novel. His plotline is going from humble beginnings to the ruler of 1/3 of China, with the assistance of stout allies. Next is Cao Cao, ruler of Wei. He's often placed in the role of the villain of the novel, with a focus on ruthless ambition. When I was playing, I was using Cao Cao. And then there's Sun Jian, ruler of Wu. I always felt they got the short end of the stick in the book. If I had to pick out themes for them, I'd go with familial obligation and the joys of setting everything around you on fire. And then the remaining three are Yuan Shao, Dong Zhuo, and Liu Bao. Characters who were heads of minor factions in the novel, and narratively existed mainly to get stepped on by the big three. As for how this game plays, well, Naxat's Sangokushi is a blatant and weaker copy of Koei's Sangokushi. It's not one-to-one, but so many of the elements are transparently lifted wholesale. For example, the initial phase of the game takes place on a grand strategy map of China, where you have individual provinces that you control, and can take actions for each of them. You get 2 actions per province per turn, 1 domestic development, and 1 military development. When you select a province, you initially have a menu that gives you a choice between domestic, military, receive diplomats, save, and end the province's turn. For your domestic options, you can build up your infrastructure, seek new generals, engage in diplomacy, and take a look at how other provinces are doing. While for your military options, you can attack, train, hire more soldiers, buy them equipment, and build your defenses. All generals, including your main one, are rated on 4 stats: martial ability, leadership, intelligence, and virtue. Those stats determine how well they do at any given assignment. It's possible for a character with higher stats to train a character with lower stats, so somebody with low numbers isn't stuck there. If you choose to attack, or are attacked, then you assign forces to your generals and go to a strategic map. In these battles, you have to completely wipe out the other side for a victory. As the battle starts, you choose your initial camp, assuming you're not being attacked. And then you can also choose to hide your forces in rough terrain to act as an ambush. Of course, if you move out of that terrain, then you lose that ambush ability, but it gives you something. You alternate turns with the opponent, and on your turn, every one of your units can take one action. They can move, attack, use a strategy, or pass. Strategies include things like faking the number of soldiers that you have, trying to lure somebody out by taunting them, or setting things on fire. Strategies not only rely on your stats, but the type of terrain that the unit is in and the type of terrain that the opponent is in. I never got any strategy to work, so it seems like these have very low chance of success. When an enemy unit and your unit come together, then it's time to go to the tactical map. And here you're given a choice of what formation to use, and then a turn-based tactical battle starts. But the only unit you control in battle is the general. You can move them up to people and attack enemy units all you like. A general with high martial ability can easily wipe out 10,000 soldiers in a battle all on their own. When the two generals collide, then you go to yet another system. This one is an RPG-style battle where you engage in a duel with the other general. If you kill that general, then their entire force loses right there. For my part in these tactical battles, I had some really strong dynasty warriors, and so I didn't mind charging them into the middle of formations and attacking wildly. It mostly worked out okay for me. Unfortunately for Sangokushi, Eiketsu Tenka ni Nozomu, it's one of those strategy games where you have to play for 5 or 6 hours to learn the basic systems before you can really get a handle on the game. And I just never have enough time to give these games their proper due. All I could do was pick Cao Cao, perform a couple of turns on the provincial map, and then get into 2 different battles. So I was fumbling my way through figuring out how to provision my army correctly, how many soldiers were appropriate to use in an invasion force, what the most effective way to equip them was. All of the details that you only learn by playing and practicing for a long time. There are a few more strategy games to go on the PC Engine that are based on Romance of the Three Kingdoms, and there is a sequel to Sangokushi Eiketsu Tenka ni Nozomu. The other strategy games are also called Sangokushi, so I really do have to use the full title whenever I talk about this game. Japanese players don't seem to be especially fond of this one. I found one person who said, "I can't believe I put up with this when I was a kid." Another talked about how after they bought it, they immediately went back to Koei's games because Naxat's was so boring. People were more excited by acquiring the custom notebook than the actual game. My personal feeling here is that if you were going to play a strategy game about Three Kingdoms era China, then you're going to play Koei's Romance of the Three Kingdoms series. Okay, I know some of you are already posting about your love of Total War Three Kingdoms, but I'm sticking to the easy comparison. In many of the important ways, Sangokushi Eiketsu Tenka ni Nozomu strips away the interesting strategic options of Koei's games. It adds a few things like the tactical battle map, but those just become excuses for your high martial ability characters to charge through armies. I don't want to be too judgmental here because I really can't give it a fair shake, but I didn't see anything here that would make me want to continue playing it.